Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for the Minister. If he could lift his head out of his magazine for just a second and listen to the debate that's going on in the House that he is supposed to be responsible for, I have a couple of questions for him. My first question is this. How is this legislation going to make one iota of difference to the housing crisis that we face in my electorate in Palmerston North? And if the Minister doesn't think there is a housing crisis in Palmerston North, then he should get there and come and talk to the people and talk to some of the agencies that deal with people who are in need of social and emergency accommodation in Palmerston North. Because if you drive around my city right now, and this has been the case for quite some time, and it's getting worse, there are huge tracts of empty land where there used to be state houses. On Botanical Road, that land has been empty for 7 years, with absolutely no plan for what to do with it.
No plan.
On Rugby Street, that land has been empty for 3 years. In Selby Crescent, that land has just been emptied now. And finally, we hear there is a plan. Can anybody guess what the plan is for that land? Sell it off, flog it off. And this land isn't even going to the NGOs or the private developers or the foreign banks that the National Party wants to bring into social housing. This isn't for social housing. This is just outright privatisation. Selling it off, less social housing for the people who live in my community. Now, how do they justify that? Well, I'll tell you how they justify that. They say, there's only 20 people on the housing waiting list. Well, we've just heard from Megan Woods and Carmel Sepuloni how they do that. 6,000 people apply for a state house in New Zealand, and 4,000 of them are denied even the opportunity to get on the waiting list. And where do those people go when they are denied access to the waiting list? Well, they end up at the doorstep of the Salvation Army, who have had their funding cut and have had to reduce the amount of emergency accommodation that they can provide. They end up at the doorstep of Women's Refuge, who are now having to screen women with families who come and ask for their assistance, because women, regardless of whether they have suffered abuse, are being told by the Ministry for Social Development to go to Women's Refuge to seek housing with them, because work and income can't satisfy their urgent and desperate need for emergency accommodation. So Women's Refuge, already cash-strapped, already having had to close down one facility in Palmerston North and having more of their funding cut in this very budget, are having to waste time determining whether or not women with families who come to them actually fit the criteria for their service, because this government is abrogating their responsibility to provide emergency accommodation to people who desperately need it. That is what is happening in my electorate. And if any national MP honestly believes that the situation is rosy, then get yourself down to your local Salvation Army. Get yourself down to your local Women's Refuge. Go and talk to any of the other agencies, like in my electorate, it would be the Methodist Social Services or Shepherd's Rest, who have also had their funding cut. Go and ask them what the real story is. Your numbers do not tell the truth. Your numbers have been deliberately constructed by you to try and fool the people into thinking there is no housing crisis. The people are not fooled. The people are not fooled. We know full well there is a massive shortage of emergency accommodation. People are living in their cars. People are sleeping under bridges. People are having to couch surf from one friend to another just to try and find a place to put a roof over their heads. Families are accommodating other families with massive overcrowding in those houses because this government does not want to participate in a fundamental role of the state, and that is to make sure that every citizen that it represents actually has somewhere to call home and a roof to put over their head and the safety and security that comes with it. I urge members on that side of the House who can't be bothered to get out of their seats and participate in this debate, Go to the Salvation Army, go to Women's Refuge and find out the truth.
Call Jamie Lee Ross.